is to, what we'd like to do with this is to add it onto the industry placement Padlet for colleagues that were unable to attend today. So we dealt with microphones, chats. If you're having any problems with bandwidth, for example, and the sessions being intermittent, try turning your camera off. That will probably work. So the aims for today's session was to introduce our providers to the 3 SME partners for digital construction and management administration. We're going to hear from our speakers today, and we're going to be able to identify what they do and how they do what they do, and more importantly, learn how we can access their service. And while we're doing that, I think our speakers will also be talking about ways of working or preferred ways of working based on what they've been doing thus far. So it'll give us all an opportunity to reflect on how we might engage our SME delivery partners as well. And of course, the aim of this is to provide additional support to our providers to engage SMEs. Thank you. Next slide, please, Abby. So just a little bit of context before we introduce Sarah Andrews, our first speaker. So the DfE have put together the funding for engaging these SME partners. Really, I think it was in direct response to feedback that we were getting from you during the lockdown period in particular, and how providers were struggling to engage SMEs. So overall, the sector in the UK is really important because it's a massive driver of economic growth and innovation in the UK. And the DfE are really kind of committed in supporting this sector through a range of initiatives and policies, and this is one of them. So the SME kind of sector in the UK. Well, somebody's got their microphone off and I'm getting some background noise. So I've been online and I had a look at some stats here. So at the start of 2021, there were 5.5 million small businesses with 0 to 49 employees. And that's huge. The SMEs account for 3/5 of employment and around half of the turnover in the UK private sector. Total employment in SMEs between 0 and 215 employees was around 16.3 million. That's 61%, whilst turnover was estimated at 2.3 trillion. That's 52% of GDP. And employment in small businesses with 0 to 49 employees was around 12.9 million people, 48% of the total. And the turnover with those smaller SMEs was about 1.6 trillion. So it's 36% of our GDP. 99% of the nation's business population are SMEs and employ over 60% of the country's workforce. And micro businesses, and these are the really hard ones to engage with, the micro businesses between 1 and 9 employees was the only category that saw numbers grow during the 12 months up until the start of 2021, with a further 5,300 small businesses being registered. In contrast to the decline, I think, in the SME sector, certainly impacted as we went into lockdown and we're dealing with a pandemic. And you probably don't need me to tell you at all that the COVID has the biggest negative impact on the self-employed workforce. And that number of people dropped by a huge 8.6% in 2021. So taking all this into account from the Office of National Statistics and the Department for Innovation and Skills, the DfE kind of put this programme together to help you as providers engage with SME businesses in your region. So hopefully that's kind of put a little bit of context around what we're talking about today. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Andrews, if I may. And Sarah Andrews works for Supply Chain, and they address and deal with management, administration, industry placement. So if I could hand over to you, please, Sarah.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about today, about kind of what our contract is for, how we can really support you and how things have generally been working best We've been doing this since around July from there. So it's still relatively new, but there is still kind of ways that we've found that have worked the best from here. So just as a starting point, just tell you.
I'm just going to say next slide, please, Abby. Thank you.
And the next one as well. So Supply Train as a company, so we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we support businesses to employ and develop young people from all walks of life. Something that is our main kind of ambition in supporting young people, and we do it in a variety of ways. So we do have an entry-level recruitment service. We offer careers and mentoring support to those that are employed via that recruitment service. And then the T-level contract is part of our social mobility project. So we did initially deal with the Kickstart scheme, and we placed 900 young people around the country into new jobs. But as the T-level contracts, that's what we're dealing with, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So as Peter mentioned, we're doing management and administration. We also do legal, finance and accounting. So just bear that in mind if you are going to be offering any of those either next year or if you're offering them this year as well. So in terms of engaging SMEs, we are fully aware that a lot of SMEs haven't yet heard of T-levels or industry placements. It's quite an anonymous subject to them, and that's really where we're here to try and support you, is take away a little bit of that pressure and engage those employers and give them that understanding and basic knowledge of what T-levels are, and hopefully create a little bit of excitement as well, so that then they can kind of increase their desire, I guess, to host an industry placement and support students. So what we have done is we created a landing page called T-level Gateway. I can pop that into the chat once I've finished talking, just for you to have a look around, but it's mainly aimed at the employers. And all it does is just explain a little bit about what T-levels are and a few FAQs just to give them basic understanding. If they're interested at that point, they can submit an inquiry of interest, which will come through to our employer support team. So we signpost them all there via mixed marketing. So we do a lot of email marketing, we do outbound calling. We have been known to go out to businesses directly in person as well. It's just a little bit difficult with our company because we're based at complete opposite ends of the country. So it's hard to get us all together to go out and do that. So once an inquiry comes through of interest, our employer support team will call the employers, and we are fully aware that as providers, you will do things slightly differently. Some of you are doing day release, some are doing block release, and you've just got different resources in place to be able to facilitate any employers that do come your way. So we do try and keep it as open as possible. We don't want to overpromise anything so that the relationship breaks down at any point. So our team will give them a call and explain about T-levels, kind of how they generally work, how industry placements fit into that. And we'll have a chat with them as well about their business and just really look at whether or not they can offer a high quality placement for a student. If we do feel that they could, once we've assessed, we will signpost them to the nearest provider that is either currently offering that particular T-level or that is going to be offering it next year, so you can make that connection a little bit earlier as well. So once we do signpost them, as a provider, you'll get an automated email from us, and that'll include all of the employer's contact details and a little bit of a summary about what the employer can offer, what type of tasks they might be able to offer, just so that you've got a little bit of a heads up before you make contact with them as to how they might fit in with what you can offer at that stage. We'll have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of supporting you as providers, so even though we're mainly kind of focused on engaging the SMEs, we're really aware of the time constraints and resources that you've got available. So we do want to work as well with you as we can do. So really working with us will just help free up some of the time that you would usually be spending searching for those employers as well, taking away a little bit of that legwork. It's not to take it away from you completely, because of course you will still be kind of doing all of that yourself as well. It's just that we might be able to help in providing you with some additional leads to employers. And when we do signpost the employer, they are generally a very warm lead, We've gone through the process with them, we've looked at their suitability, and they're really keen in offering that industry placement. And as music to all ears as it is with everyone else, there's no cost to the service as well, which makes it even better. So in terms of what is working well, if we could just have the next slide, please. Thank you. As I say, we've been doing this really since September and working with providers, but most of the success that we've found is with the providers who act on the referral, generally within a few days of receiving it. We do check in with employers, so we try to keep that relationship going until a commitment has been made, that they can offer that industry placements. We will check in with them usually every week or every other week, just to see if they've made contact and if kind of there's anything we can do to help further facilitate that relationship. Providers who are responsive to us as well and open about how your work is going have usually found that we've been in a better position to support them as well, especially according to the students' needs. So it's really helpful if you are in contact with me at any point, just to let me know, how many placements you've still got available, if there's certain geographical areas that might be more suitable than others, and then we can do target marketing in that area just to try and support in finding those employers as well. So then my last slide before I hand over, just a little bit of an example of one of the recent kind of scenarios that we've gone through. So we had an initial meeting. So usually if I've been in contact, if I've managed to kind of connect with anyone, usually have just a quick 15 to 30 minute meeting just to have a chat and see how things are going. It's really helpful for us if we know if you're doing things like day release or block release, when the placements might be taking place and so on. And again, we can try and set those expectations with employers as well at that early stage. Then we targeted the local area based on the information that they gave us. We got some employers kind of really enthusiastic about how they could support the students. And then after speaking with them, we signposted them, and the outcome of this was that 3 placements were agreed within three weeks of the initial interaction. Now, I understand that's not going to be common across all, because sometimes it does take a lot longer than that, but it can happen. So we are here to support you wherever we can, and obviously feedback along the way for us is great as well. So just on the last slide of mine, it's just my contact details. So if anyone does want to reach out and get in contact, please feel free to give me a call. That's my direct number and my email address there as well. But thank you all for listening to me today.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah.
Nice.
Okay, next slide, please, Abby. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Sebastian Johnson from Evolve Your Future, and Evolve deal and support with construction placement. So over to you, please, Seb.
I almost forgot to turn my microphone on then. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining on for everyone as well. Thanks, Sarah, for handing over as well. Really good to see how you do it as well. So yeah, welcome everyone. Next slide, please, Abby. So I'll just talk a little bit at first about who we are as a company. So we're originally a careers advice and training company. We've been in trade now for over 15 years. So we've done a long time. We run multiple courses, including maths and English, essential digital skills, and employability courses to support our learners and our customers on their next career journeys. We also run examinations for CSCS cards and AET, and we also do deliver the health and safety course. Now, I know some colleges will be screaming and chomping at a bit to say, can you help us with this, please? We're working on something so we can offer it to all colleges as well. So that's it's a good opportunity to have there. Next slide, please, Abby. So how we support T-Level. So as Peter said earlier, we are the construction growth partner, which means we cover the sort of the 3 main strands of construction, which is on-site construction, design, surveying and planning for construction, building services and engineering for construction. So we do have a wide area of growth in the construction sector to hit. And like the other partners, we're here to help you find placements within the SME market, as I think we've all heard of now. So it's a really good opportunity for you guys to see what issues we're facing as well, what common problems we'll face, which we'll get onto a little bit later. But next slide, please, Abby. Okay, so just some common issues that we do have. CSCS cards. I know some colleges and some other providers we've spoken to have them in place, some don't. It's really important, particularly working with SMEs, they really want to see that that CSCS card up front. Some larger employees will be able to support without them, but if you are looking at SME market, you really do need to have those CSCS cards in place. It's more for their own health and safety and insurance policies. Locality of students to SMEs. Now, this may be a little bit more specific to Evolve, but I'm sure Matthew and Sarah will also agree it can be a bit of an issue on theirs as well, is that sometimes the industry or the company is based in your local area, but the work is far away. So it could be that they're based in Birmingham, but the actual work's in Manchester. So for us, if we can get any sort of support around where the students are located as well, not just sort of live numbers, but located where they're near, how far out they can travel, that could change the perspective of where we find placements. As we're doing this across England, it can be quite a wide scope to hit. Travel as well, we do find some issues with some travel for construction companies as well. Do they pick you up? Do they not? How far can students travel as well? So if we know how far your students willing to travel, we can then work to that target for you as well. And then I'm sure Matthew and Sarah will agree with us as well. Just correct provider contact. Sometimes we're calling the wrong person, or they've left, or we're calling up your inquiries line because we have a company interested in the area, and it just doesn't get passed on. So if we know the contact details early as well, we can support you on that. Next slide, please, Abby. So just some little bits of information that we need to know. So accurate contact details, as I've already said. Accurate cohort numbers, so we know what we're expecting, particularly for future years. So if you're wave three into T levels, if we know what cohort numbers you're going to be expecting, or at least targeting, I know it's not going to be perfect just yet, but come sort of August time, if you know what we're expecting, we know what we're working towards as well. And then also, as Sarah said as well, active live learners. So we need to know what how many we're requiring placements. A rough base of where your students are located and the best way to contact. It's amazing how simple it might be that someone prefers a phone call to an email. And if we know that, we know how to deal with it straight away as well to help get that SME to you sooner. And then also just something that has come out, and I'm sure Matthew and Sarah will say the same as well. If we have 3 key placement objectives per subject you're delivering, we know what to tell the employers earlier, particularly from our side as we find live numbers, and we'll work out and go and find SMEs for your group. If we know what you're expecting from the placement, we can tell the employer earlier as well. So they know, and you know as well what we're working towards. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is actually my last little slide. It's not too long, but our key personnel. So we have 4 people really working on the project. I know Lottie, you are on the call. If you could add some names to the chat, if you haven't already, that'd be fantastic. Some contact details. So as myself, I work across the project. We have Charlotte, or Lottie, as she's known. She's also on the call. And we have Caroline and Paul as well, who work with us. Just something that I just want to add in. We work slightly different to supply train. That we will go and find the SMEs for you and bring them to you once we know they're ready to go. So we will pretty much hand them over to you in that first meeting and say, that's the relationship. We'll still be here for you and the employer. So if the employer is not responsive to you, you can contact us and we'll get back in touch with them and try to re-establish that relationship. Because we know it's not just one-way street. The employers can be slow getting back as well. So we want to make sure we help build that relationship with you. But that's it from me. Nice and short and sweet. I'll hand over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Seb. Yeah, you've said everything you needed to say. We'll see if there's any questions that come in once we've heard from Matthew. I can see there's been a couple of questions coming up in chat that we'll deal with as well. But with no further ado, last but by no means least, please let me introduce you to Matthew Harker from My Pocket Skills. And My Pocket Skills deal with digital industry placement. So thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Peter. And I guess I get the slightly toughest slot because I now have to come up with all the things that my other colleagues haven't already said about the growth partners, but there are some subtle differences, so I can fill you in on those. So yeah, I'm Matthew Harker. I'm co-founder, co-CEO of My Pocket Skill. Can I just get the next slide, please? And the next one.
Thanks, Abby.
So yes, so where we fit, we're a social impact company, and we've been around for about 5 years, and we have a social impact mission, which is all about helping young people to become more financially capable and to become more employable too. So we have an ethos which is all about helping to save, earn, and learn, and that's kind of fundamentally what we're about. So we're responsible under this program for the digital T-level, and I guess we're, as a technology business ourselves, we kind of, hopefully what we're doing is kind of, it's highly relatable to a lot of the SMEs that we're talking with as well. So a few things about kind of, I suppose, about how we work and maybe about what's different in terms of the way that we look at things. So I guess in terms of thinking about that, that flow from how we reach out to employers to how we connect a successful placement. So we start out by reaching out to those employers, and we focus in on those that have an identified need for digital services. So they're either looking for digital skills more broadly, maybe they're looking for a kind of junior analyst, or someone to do a bit of web design, or they've got a project that's been on the back burner for a while and just keeps getting postponed because they've got no internal resource to do it. So we're kind of, hopefully we're trying to track a lot of inbound interest from employers that have got a deficit around digital skills. And actually, given the current environment, a lot of digital skills are pretty hard to come by. So we do get a lot of interest. But what we do next is to onboard those employers to confirm the suitability for working on a T-level placement. So we'll have an onboarding call, and that goes through a number of different things. So we make sure they've got at least some of the attributes to be able to host a placement. So ask them about whether they've got a mentor, for instance, and this whole big issue about on-site versus entirely remote, which we see quite commonly for digital, because some employers are now 100% remote, so it's not going to work. It's going to only work for a very limited small segment of a placement. So we do a bit of an onboarding call to assess all of those things, and we also look at other things. So have they got any particular project specific issues that we need to surface with providers? So we had an interesting one last week, for instance, which was based around a prison. So they wanted someone that was over 18 for that particular placement, which doesn't rule them out entirely, but it might make it difficult for some. And also we assess whether they've got any ability to contribute towards the students' travel subsistence and any kind of wage or bursary as well, because we find that often creates a stickiness in the relationship between the student and the employer, although it's not a deal breaker. So if, for instance, you're a tiny charity but you've got a really interesting, exciting digital project, then we'll still want that project to proceed nevertheless, but we want to test that out. Now we're a digital platform ourselves, so we ask the employer to sign up to our platform, and that makes it a lot easier for us to connect with providers, to make sure that the conversations and communications with providers is happening, and it allows us to intervene at any point during that process where things start sliding, where we can see that there's a communication happening that has gone unanswered. So we use our platform as the kind of central means of communication. And because of the way we work with My Pocket Skill, so what we're also doing is, in the wider sense, we've got a lot of young people that have signed up to My Pocket Skill because they want other forms of part-time work that sit outside of the T-levels program. but it's really helpful that your students can also sign up on My Pocket Skill. We can use My Pocket Skill to help connect with providers and employers. So if you want to put a CV in front of someone they can create a profile on My Pocket Skill. It's really easy to connect them to do that. So it's just one way of us streamlining the process of student selection for that placement. Plus there's another advantage, which is obviously students that just sign up to My Pocket Skill can get access to other forms of part-time work as well, which incidentally also count against your T-level if it's relevant to that particular subject area. So once the employer has signed up, and it's like a pretty easy process to do that, then we'll make an introduction via our platform to providers. So typically we'll have already onboarded a provider, and again we do this a sort of similar way as the other two have already mentioned. So we'll have an initial conversation, and we've done that I think with a lot of the people I can see on this call today actually. So we have an initial call which is really about scoping, what's it currently looking like in terms of the number of students you've got to place. What kind of model do you look for in terms of block versus day release, any particular times of the year, and then what does the pipeline look like at the moment? Are there any particular pressure points? So we'll ask a bunch of questions, and also about things like catchment and travel time. So we know that we're not offering you students that are too far away where possible. Although we might kind of test the boundaries sometimes if we think it's an interesting enough placement. So we'll make that introduction. So we'll do a connection on our platform then between employer and provider. So we'll connect a new employer that we've onboarded. We'll connect them to the nearest or most relevant provider, and we'll facilitate that introduction and make sure that we're handing over everything. So there's a form that we use to connect people, which hopefully gives a bit of information about here's the contact details. Here's a bit about what we know about the employer. Here's a bit about what we know already about a project that might be a fit for a T-level placement. So we're handing over as much as we know from that onboarding call, so that you don't have a cold start and have to repeat too much. And then, I think as others have mentioned, every provider has a slightly different route from then onwards, in terms of exactly what extra due diligence you want to do to get an employer completely signed up. So whether you want to do the health and safety checks yourselves and go through all the policies, etc. So we kind of leave it very much to the provider at that point to go through any further checks. And then we can support the back end of the process. So once everything's agreed and an industry placement has all been signed up, we can then support the provider and the employer just to make sure everything's still continuing. And then also to help manage any payments to the student if that's been agreed as part of that placement. So that's kind of very much what we do. And then, once your T-level students are on board on the platform as well, we can also connect to any other digital type tasks that we've got available. So we have, typically 20 or 30 new assignments on our platform every day. And a lot of those are relevant to digital students. So there might be kind of, web design projects or analysing social media accounts and things like that. So we do see a lot of that too. Next slide, please. And then I guess just sharing some tips, and I won't kind of dwell too much on ones that have been kind of raised already. So these are just kind of our sense of some important factors for placements to succeed with our model and our ways of working. So the first thing I think is, just to reiterate the point that I think has been made a couple of times already, which is just about the kind of timescales and responsiveness. And we do find that just by the nature of employers wanting to talk to us, it often means that they've got, something immediate or something quite short term and can potentially go off the boil quite quickly if we don't respond. So that's not to say that they won't necessarily, hang on a few months once they know that something's going to go ahead. But they do get quite frustrated if they're not getting a response about, whether or not we can find them a placement. So I think, whilst it is possible to connect them and then delay the start, it's very difficult to re-establish that connection if we're unable to make it for a series of weeks or in some cases months that we've seen. And so we do see this thing from employers that says, you know, it may, or sorry, from providers rather, they may not have a student now, but that doesn't mean they've not got one ever. So for instance, you know, if we have an employer and maybe it's on the edge of a catchment and you don't have a student there right now, it might be that, you know, maybe in 6 months' time there is a student that's closer to that employer that might be a better fit then. So it might still be worth having a conversation with that employer just to get them on your books, because there's the broader strategic picture about wanting to build up your portfolio of employers. The second thing is about just having this, you know, point of contact and escalation. Again, I think this has been raised already about, you know, someone to call when we need to speed things up, when we need to escalate a process, or when, you know, the person that we were dealing with is on holiday or has left, or just can't be found. So that's really important, just to be able to do that. And I know some providers, for instance, will have sort of generic emails that will go to a number of different staff, and that kind of thing is always quite useful. If that's possible. And then obviously being able to get rapid links into curriculum, if we want to determine whether something really is or not within the scope of a digital T-level, that's quite useful to be able to call on that at a relatively short order from your perspective. And then the final points to make really about kind of, well, one is about flexibility. So, you know, we've seen, I guess, all different shapes and sizes of models proposed for digital T-levels, and I think we always start with the perspective of asking the employer what would work for them, and then trying to test that out with a provider. I mean, obviously, we know in our onboarding conversations with providers what kind of models will work. But often there's a negotiation to be had around this, whether it's, you know, we've seen some providers that have been able to offer flexibilities when we thought initially it was only going to be a block placement or nothing. So that, you know, there are things that have ended up working quite well. You know, and then the ability to have a discussion around what exactly the scope of a placement is, because some of the placements we found initially may not look exactly like a good fit for a digital T-level, but you know, once they discover what's actually in the curriculum and what things that are tangential to their project that might work well, we've actually been able to scope that in a number of times that's ended up fitting quite well within a digital placement. So I guess those are all the top tips I wanted to cover. In terms of getting started, so for providers that haven't already been in contact with us that want to get started, I put a link there. So there's an email, so you can email us at tlevels@mypocketskill.com, and then we've got a dedicated sign up channel for providers. So that means that we're able to clearly identify you when you sign up, and we can also bring together different people from the same college, sixth form, school, all in one place when you do that. So I'll also put that link in the chat as well. So it just makes it easier for you to sign up on a dedicated route. Great. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Matthew. Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. So to all three of our growth partners, thank you very much for putting those presentations together and explaining what you do, how you do what you do, and more importantly, how our providers can actually make contact with you. There's been a couple of things in the chat that I'm just going to go into before we open this up to any further questions. I saw from Emma Ball. Emma, are you still with us, Emma? You said that you'd had you actually had a placement thanks to supply chain. I just wondered if you could give us a couple of comments on how you found that process, please.
Yes, we have got a placement with supply chain. It was one of my colleagues who now has left the organisation who initially set the placement up once supply chain had referred over, and I'm sort of covering her caseload in the interim until we get a new advisor in post and trained up. But yeah, we were always happy to have any referrals, and obviously helps our job a little bit, because I'm sure we can all agree it's not the easiest job in the world.
No,
so
it's not.
yeah, and I think it's probably going to be really beneficial as well. I know from speaking to other providers that one of the big concerns is, you know, we're in our first year of delivery and we've got fairly small cohorts of T-level learners, so it's fairly manageable to place them this year. But as we scale up, and are working with big, large numbers, that's, you know, where we anticipate having difficulties placing students. So yeah, great to have anybody on board that can, you know, work in partnership with us and help.
Brilliant. How did you find the process? Did it work for you?
Yes, I think it was mostly the initial information came through over email, which was, you know, probably the best way to get hold of us, because we're always in and out of the office, you know, off-site with employers or in classes. So yeah, the process was smooth for us.
And smooth from our side as well. So yeah, worked well.
Excellent. I'm seeing some good feedback coming into chat as we were speaking then. So Lee Fisher from Access Creative College can't speak highly enough of Zara and My Pocket Skills. So it looks like you've had 6 to 8 via My Pocket Skills, those placements. So that's really good news. If Seb, I just wondered, I saw a message in chat about CSCS cards. Seb, I just wondered if you could just say something, kind of expand on what your response into the chat for the rest of the group, please.
Yeah, so with your CSCS cards, there's sort of 2 elements that need to be considered. So first off, we need to have a health and safety course. So level 1 safety course is a minimum to have completed. That's what the base requirement is. And then you can do that test online, which we're looking to do. We're trying to make sure that test is all sorted out, so we can hopefully run it for you guys as well. However, the second part of it is a CSCS test. Now that has to be done at a fully licensed CSCS or CITB site, they can be known as. So they have to be done at that site. The reason being, there's been a lot of fraudulent activity around CSCS cards, and that's been a huge concern in the construction industry. So they've really clamped down on it. So we have a test centre up here in Northamptonshire, but we know obviously that's not quite local for those who are in maybe down in Walsall or down up in Manchester, I should say. So it's not always easily accessible. But what we can do is we can support and help you find a test centre near you that will be able to run the CSCS cards for you. We're not going to say we know every single test centre, but certainly we know places we can look to find you one. But do look for us when we are sending out some more details with regards to the health and safety course and how we can help you complete that as well, because we have identified it and we want to help you, help all the providers as much as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Seb. There's a question coming from Lee Fisher from Access Creative. How will Annex A flexibilities figure in placement brokerage going forward? Lee, are you still with us? And do you want to just expand on what your question is for us, please?
Yeah, for sure. And hi, everyone on the call. So the industry placement flexibilities were announced on the 10th of January, which effectively means no longer are we directly going to employers to ask for a 315-hour work placement. And I just wondered, you know, everybody's thoughts on the call, and particularly in terms of brokerage, how that is going to figure in what we can actually offer to employers now in terms of things like small group projects, which are, you know, totally a good way of getting hours against a placement in a probably more controlled environment, and you know how that approach to employers is going to look like going forward, because I think we are not just simply looking anymore for just 315-hour work placements.
We've got Sam from DFE on the call. Sam, I don't know if you want to come in on this.
So, sorry, could you repeat the question? I don't know about anyone else, but I'm having a bit of a funny network connection.
Yeah. I think we're having a few gremlins to be expected with technology. Sorry, Lee.
Go on, Lee. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just making point on the Annex A flexibilities that have been recently announced, I believe, on the 10th of January.
Yeah.
And now there's more ways of achieving industry placement hours rather than the traditional 315 hours with the employer in the workplace. And I just wondered how that is going to figure in the brokerage from colleagues on the call today in terms of approaching employers?
I suppose the best way, I think it's a case of making sure that people on this call and sort of going forward with employers are sort of familiarised with the flexibilities in the first place, and then kind of going forward to talk to, well, I think it's basically making sure the employers that you speak to, depending on what sort of sector they're in. So, for example, if you spoke with a engineering manufacturing employer, for example, then you'd be able to sort of tailor the conversations based towards some of the approaches that we have, such as sort of the supply chain model, where you can have more than sort of 2 extra employers as well as a lead employer. And I think it's a way to be able to sort of generate those conversations. So if an employer can't take on a student for a full amount of hours, then you're able to sort of come back with those examples of saying, well, actually, if you don't feel like as an employer you could be the lead employer or could only do a certain amount of hours, what can you offer based off this approach that we've got? And I think that's why we try to make the sort of Annex A as accessible and sort of easy to understand as possible, so that for you guys going and other people sort of generating conversations, particularly for providers as well, to have sort of quite straightforward conversations with employers to sort of say, if they can't commit to those 315 hours, what are the other options based off what we've got?
Yeah, I might add to that as well, Lee, that I think because of the new delivery approaches that we've got, if you as a provider deemed that you were working with one of the growth partners, for example, you could specify with that employer engagement activity what you wanted them to be able to support. So whether you're going to be taking advantage of one of the new delivery approaches, for example, that could be a discussion that you may have with the growth partner, the SME growth partners, and you could move towards that as an outcome. I think one of the key messages today, I think, that we can take away from listening to the 3 presentations is making sure that we are communicating with each other about what we want and what our expectations are. I think time sensitivity has been a key theme for all 3 delivery partners, actually. And I think everybody in the room today can agree that it's a real challenge working with employers and keeping them warm. So I think there's real scope if we keep these channels and these lines of communication open with each other, and actually kind of work with each other in these new ways to kind of bring the best possible outcomes for our students, whether that's going to be using the new delivery approaches or whether that's going to be a more traditional model of a block or a 2 days a week or a day placement for our students. Is there anything else? Anybody got any other questions? I'm not seeing a huge amount of questions in chat, but are there any other questions from anybody? There is a question. Can I ask Sam when the DfE will be reading more about the employer incentives? Okay, I can probably deal with that because I literally just came off a call before I came into this one. So there's going to be an announcement on Thursday. All of our providers should be receiving a letter from the DfE on Thursday. There should be some links on there which will give you access to 2 webinars that are going to take place just after Easter. So you'll have an option where you'll be able to come into those webinars and hear directly from DfE about the new delivery guidance and kind of the rules stipulating how this fund will be used. Or how it could be used. So I haven't got any specifics for you at this stage. I won't be hearing myself until just after Thursday, which is when I'm going to be hearing from the DfE. So yeah, I believe the fund starts. There's another question just popped in from Kim. The fund starts 1st of April. Yes, it does. And I think the dates for the 2 webinars will be detailed on the letter you received this Thursday, Kim. So I'm not sure if that's going to be helpful for you or not. Sam, do you have the dates?
I would just going to say I'm happy to quickly come in, Pete.
Cheers.
Yeah, so off of the top of my head, I believe there be the week commencing, I think it's the 12th, and so it might be the week after. Yeah, the 18th and the 20th of April. So the reason that we've done it sort of, I appreciate the fund starts on the 1st of April. The reason that we've sort of put the webinars in a few weeks after, obviously to bear in mind the Easter holiday break, but because we was going to be publishing all the guidance in the next couple of days alongside the letters, we thought it would give you as providers a bit of time to sort of digest everything that we've published, and then sort of, because during the webinars we'll be running Q&A sessions, so then it gives you guys a couple of weeks to then come to us essentially with questions that you might have that we can hopefully answer for you. But we were mindful about the fact that the Easter holidays obviously in 2 weeks, and we didn't want to rush it all. But yes, so we're just finishing off publishing our guidance and everything as well, Kim. So and as we said, everything will be in the letter that we send out on Thursday.
Yeah, so yeah, we will be getting that full guidance on Thursday, Kim, which is really good. There's another question coming from Gabriella. Could youth employment charities get this email from DFE as well? Interesting. Are they in scope, Sam?
I don't believe they are, purely just because the email that we're sending out is letters specifically to providers. But I mean, if there's someone that can pass it on, or if there's an email, if they need it, then we can happily pass it on in terms of the detail. Obviously, the actual letter is specifically tailored to each provider, because on the letter will be sort of the allocations and stuff like that. So they'll be individual. So I'm not sure whether it's something that they'd want to be passed on, but if people want to pass on the sort of detail, then they feel free to.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. A message, or yes, a question from Joanna, South Devon. We were on the call this morning, so hello again, Joanna. It's a question to My Pocket Skill. Do you look for placements in Torbay? Nothing for our region yet. So Matthew or Zara.
Hi, Joanna. We certainly do. Yes. I was just looking after I read your question to see what we've done so far. I think there was one employer, but I think they might be just slightly too far for you, because I think they're in Tavistock.
Yeah, it was Tavistock. That's a long way to get from hours.
But if you've got some other burning placements you need to fill, we can certainly add you to the kind of priority list and see if we can sort something for you soonest.
Yes, please. Digital is the production, design and development. I filled in all the stuff online on your website a while ago, but it's either Plymouth or Tavistock, so neither of those are really feasible.
Yeah, so let's see if we can find something closer for you.
Thank you, that'd be great.
After the call for you.
Fab, thanks.
You're welcome.
Could somebody just turn that's better? Background noise is gone. So there's Christian. What dates for the webinar again? Sam, did you say what the dates were? Oh, you've got it in the chat. So there's the 18th and the 20th. Brilliant. There's no more questions come up in chat. Does anybody in the room have any questions at all before we move into the last section of today's webinar? Okay. I'm just going to post a short poll. I would really appreciate, I've got 61 people on the call. If I could get 61 responses, I would be really happy. It's literally a couple of questions just to find out how beneficial you found today's session. Are you satisfied with the day's session? It just helps us when we're working with DFE to make sure that we're on point, and all of the provision that we put in place for you is kind of targeted and tailored to meet your needs. So thank you everybody for taking time to do that. While you're on that poll, just to let you know, on the very last slide on this slide deck, which you will get access to once we've downloaded the recording, I've also added the web addresses for our 3 SME growth partners as well. We've got all the contacts. We'll make sure that you've got everybody's contact details. Thank you to our growth partners for putting in your email addresses and contact details into the chat as well. We'll make sure that chat is transcripted and sent out to everybody too. And if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody, and you think, I wish I'd asked this question, please feel free to email myself or my team, or go directly to our SME growth partners now, because you've got their contact details, but we'd be more than happy to do that for you. I really hope everybody's found today useful. Thank you. I'm seeing some people saying it's been really useful. That's brilliant. I'm really hoping that we kind of get this going and get some momentum behind this, because I think there's some real potential from all three of our growth partners here to make a massive difference to certainly helping you reach your targets. So I want to thank everybody again for giving up some time and listening to us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Pete. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.